Hello, and welcome to APM Research, Heaven and Hell. Today, we would like to take you on an exciting journey up to the heavens and straight down to hell. This should give you a better understanding of the connection these two are playing in our material world. Are you ready? Good. Fasten your seatbelts and let's go. What we have here are two constellation maps. One is with an incorrect Mercator map projection, which is here. This layout would be just like viewing a map, but with this one, the images are all chopped up to portray going around the globe, with the idea that Alaska and Russia are right next to each other. As it has been pointed out in the past, this is not what our world is, and we at APM have proven this through flight routes, as well as ship cruises. The international dateline is the area they have cut off to hide the gates and what is beyond. The international dateline is faked to support the globe model, the ring of fire projection, and the misinterpreted aurora borealis projection. A big thanks to FPV for cutting and correcting the sky projection map of the constellations, as well as these others from the past. So as a little bonus, let's look at some of the previous corrections that we have made. The ring of fire, the aurora borealis, and the CIA map of safe zones. Now, here's the corrected version of the constellations that we see in the heavens. Notice how all the constellations are intact as one character instead of chopped in half. Also, how the land masses align correctly in the north and the south. Also, looking at the two sine waves, notice how they flip completely opposite to one another, yet they still work to create the sine wave. Now, we are going to travel to the heavens and show how all this works. Aquarius is a constellation of the zodiac. Its name is Latin for water carrier or cup carrier. Aquarius is one of the oldest of the recognized constellations along the zodiac, which is the sun's path. It is found in a region often called the sea due to its profusion of constellations with watery associations. There you will find Cetus the well, Eridanus the river. Aquarius is identified as the Great One in Babylonian star catalogs and represents the god Ah himself, who is commonly depicted holding an overflowing vase. The Babylonian star figure appears with entitlement stones and cylinder seals from the second millennium. It contained the winter solstice in the early Bronze Age. In old Babylonian astronomy, Ah was the ruler of the southernmost quarter of the sun's path, the way of Ah, corresponding to the period of 45 days on either side of the winter solstice. Aquarius was also associated with the destructive floods that the Babylonians regularly experienced. In Greek mythology, Aquarius is sometimes associated with Deus Leon, the son of Prometheus, who built a ship with his wife Pyrrha to survive an imminent flood. They sailed for 9 days before washing ashore on Mount Parnassus. Aquarius is also sometimes identified with the beautiful Ganymede, a youth in Greek mythology and the son of the Trojan king Tros, who was taken to Mount Olympus by Zeus to act as a cup carrier to the gods. Yet another figure associated with the water bearer is Cecropes, a king of Athens who sacrificed water instead of wine to the gods. There are 3 major meteor showers with radiance that come from Aquarius. The Eta Aquarids, which is between April 21st and May 12th. This one is seen coming from the water jug. The Delta Aquarids, which peak once on July 29th and again on August 6th. And the Iota Aquarids, which also peaks on August 6th. Capricornus. Its name is Latin for the horn goat, or the goat horn, or having horns like a goat, and it is commonly represented in the form of a sea goat. This is a mythical creature that is half goat, half fish. This constellation is also located in the area of the sky called the Sea. It is the smallest constellation in the zodiac. The constellation was first attested in depictions on a cylinder seal from around the 21st century BCE. It was explicitly recorded in the Babylonian star catalogs before 1000 BCE. In the early Bronze Age, the winter solstice occurred in the constellation. But due to the precession of the equinoxes, the December solstice now takes place in the constellation Sagittarius. The Sun is now in the constellation Capricorn from late January through mid-February. Although the solstice during the Northern Hemisphere's winter no longer takes place while the Sun is in the constellation Capricornus, as it did until 130 BCE, the astrological sign called Capricorn is still used to denote the position of the solstice, and the latitude of the Sun's most southerly position continues to be called the Tropic of Capricorn, a term which also applies to the line on the Earth at which the Sun is directly overhead at local noon on the day of the December solstice. Despite its faintness, the constellation Capricornus has one of the oldest mythological associations, having been consistently represented as a hybrid of a goat and a fish since the Middle Bronze Age, when the Babylonians used Mulsuhermas, the goatfish, as a symbol of their god Ah. In Greek mythology, the constellation is sometimes identified as Amathea, the goat that suckled the infant Zeus after his mother Rhea saved him from being devoured by his father Kronos. Sagittarius. Its name is Latin for the archer and is commonly represented as a centaur pulling back a bow. The Babylonians identified Sagittarius as the god Nergal, a strange centaur-like creature firing an arrow from a bow. In Greek mythology, Sagittarius is usually identified as a centaur, half human, half horse. However, perhaps due to the Greeks' adoption of the Sumerian constellation, some confusion surrounds the identity of the archer. Some identify Sagittarius as the centaur Chiron, the son of Philyra and Kronos, who is said to have changed himself into a horse to escape his jealous wife, Rhea, and tutor to Jason. As there are two centaurs in the sky, some identify Chiron with the other constellation known as Centaurus. Or, as an alternative tradition holds, that Chiron devised the constellations Sagittarius and Centaurus to help guide the Argonauts in their quest for the Golden Fleece. A competing mythological tradition, as espoused by Eratosthenes, identified the archer not as a centaur, but as the satyr Crotus, son of Pan, who Greeks credited with the invention of archery. According to myth, Crotus often went hunting on horseback and lived among the Muses, who requested that Zeus place him in the sky, where he is seen demonstrating archery. The arrow of the constellation points towards the star Antares, the heart of the scorpion, and Sagittarius stands poised to attack should Scorpius ever attack the nearby Hercules, or to avenge Scorpius's slaying of Orion. Scorpius. Its name is Latin for scorpion. It is a large constellation located in the southern hemisphere near the center of the Milky Way. It is written that Orion boasted to goddess Artemis and her mother Leto that he would kill every animal on earth. Although Artemis was known to be a hunter herself, she offered protection to all the creatures. Artemis and her mother Leto sent a scorpion to deal with Orion. The pair battled, and the scorpion killed Orion. However, the contest was apparently a lively one that caught the attention of the king of the gods, Zeus, who later raised the scorpion to heaven at the request of Artemis. So every winter, Orion hunts in the sky, but every summer he flees as the constellation of Scorpion comes. In another Greek story involving Scorpio without Orion, Phaeton, whom is the mortal male offspring of Helios, went to his father, who had earlier sworn by the river Styx to give Phaeton anything he should ask for. Phaeton wanted to drive his father's sun chariot for a day. Although Helios tried to dissuade his son, Phaeton was adamant. However, when the day arrived, Phaeton panicked and lost control of the white horses that drew the chariot. First, the earth grew chill as Phaeton flew too high and encountered the celestial scorpion. Its deadly sting raised a strike. Alarmed, he dipped the chariot too close, causing all the vegetation to burn. By accident, Phaeton turned most of Africa into a desert and darkened the skin of the Ethiopian nation. Eventually, Zeus was forced to intervene by striking the runaway chariot and Phaeton with a lightning bolt to put an end to its rampage. and Phaeton plunged into the river Eridanos. The Babylonians called this constellation Mul-Ghurtab, the Scorpion. The signs can literally read as the creature with a burning sting. In some old descriptions, the constellation Libra was treated as the scorpion's claws. Libra was known as the claws of Scorpion in the Babylonian times. The Western astrological sign Scorpio differs from the astronomical constellation. Astronomically, the Sun is in Scorpius for only 6 days, from November 23rd to November 28th. Scorpius corresponds to the Hindu nakshatras Anuradha, Yeshtha, and Mula. Libra. Its name is Latin for weighing scales. Libra was known in Babylonian astronomy as Mul Zibanu, the scales or balance, as alternatively as the claws of Scorpion. The scales were held sacred to the sun god Shamash, who was also the patron of truth and justice. It was also seen as the scorpion's claws in ancient Greece. In Arabic, Zubana means scorpion's claws, and likely, similarly in other Semitic languages, this resemblance of words may be why the scorpion's claws became the scales. It has also been suggested that the scales are an allusion to the fact that when the sun entered this part of the ecliptic at the autumnal equinox, the days and nights are equal. Libra's status as the location of the equinox earned the equinox the name first point of Libra, though this location ceased to coincide with the constellation in 730 AD because of the precession of the equinoxes. In ancient Egypt, the 3 brightest stars of Libra formed a constellation that they viewed as a boat. Virgo. Its name is Latin for virgin. Virgo is prominent in the spring sky in the northern hemisphere, visible all night in March and April. As the largest zodiac constellation, the sun takes 44 days to pass through it, longer than any other. During the Middle Ages, Virgo sometimes was associated with the Blessed Virgin Mary. Early Greek astronomy associated the Babylonian constellation with their goddess Demeter. The Romans associated it with their goddess Ceres. Alternatively, the constellation was sometimes identified as the virgin goddess Iastita or Astrea, holding the scales of justice in her hand. That has now been separated as the constellation Libra. Classical Times identifies Virgo as Erigon, the daughter of Icarius of Athens. Icarius, who had been favored by Dionysus, was killed by his shepherds while they were intoxicated, after which Erigon hanged herself in grief. Another figure who is associated with the constellation Virgo was the spring goddess Persephone, the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, who had married Hades and resides in the underworld during the summer. Leo. Its name is Latin for lion. Leo, was one of the earliest recognized constellations, with archaeological evidence that the Mesopotamians had a similar constellation as early as 4000 BCE. The Persians called Leo Sur or Shur. The Turks referred to it as Artan. For the Syrians, it was Aryo. For the Jews, it was Eri. The Indians called him Simha. All of these mean lion. Some mythologists believe that in Samaria, Leo represented the monster Humbaba, who was killed by Gilgamesh. In Babylonian astronomy, the constellation was called Argula, the Great Lion. The bright star Regulus was known as the star that stands at the lion's breast. Regulus also had distinctly regal associations, as it was known as the king star. In Greek mythology, Leo was identified as the Nemean lion, which was killed by Hercules during the first of his 12 labors. The Nemean lion would take women as hostages to its lair in the cave, luring warriors from nearby towns to save the damsel in distress. To their misfortune, the lion was impervious to any weaponry. Thus, the warriors' clubs, swords, and spears were rendered useless against it. Realizing that he must defeat the lion with his bare hands, Hercules slipped into the lion's cave and engaged it at close quarters. When the lion pounced, Hercules caught it in mid-air, one hand grasping the lion's forelegs and the other his hind legs, and bent it backwards, breaking its back and freeing the trapped maidens. Zeus commemorated this labor by placing the lion in the sky. As of 2002, the sun appears in the constellation Leo from August 10th to September 10th, and the meteor shower the Leonids occur in November, peaking on November 14th and 15th. It causes a significant outburst every 35 years. Cancer. Its name is Latin for crab. It is best visible at 9 p.m. during the month of March. Under city skies, Cancer is invisible to the naked eye. Cancer is said to have been the place for the Akkadian sun of the south, perhaps from its position at the summer solstice in very remote antiquity. But afterwards it was associated with the fourth month, Duzu, that's June through July in the modern Western calendar, and was known for the northern gate of the sun. Showing but few stars, Cancer was often considered the dark sign, quaintly described as black and without eyes. Dante, alluding to this faintness and position in the heavens, wrote in Paradiso, "Then a light among them brightened, so that if Cancer one such crystal had, winter would have a month of one sole day." Cancer was the location of the sun's most northerly position in the sky, the summer solstice, in ancient times, though this position now occurs in Taurus due to the precession of the equinoxes around June 21st. This is the time the sun is directly overhead at 23.5 degrees north, a parallel now known as the Tropic of Cancer. In Coptic Egypt, it identified with Anubis, one of the Egyptian divinities commonly associated with Sirius. Gemini. Its name is Latin for twins. In classical antiquity, Cancer and not Gemini was the location of the sun on the first day of summer. In 1990, the location of the sun on the first day of summer moved from Gemini to Taurus. The sun will move through Gemini from June 21st through July 20th, all the way through the year 2062. Gemini is prominent in the winter skies of the northern hemisphere and is visible the entire night in December and January. In Babylonian astronomy, the stars Castor and Pollux were known as the Great Twins. The twins were regarded as minor gods and were called Meshlamteia and Lugalira, meaning respectively the one who has risen from the underworld and the mighty king. Both names can be understood as titles of Nergal, the major Babylonian god of plague and pestilence, who is the king of the underworld. The Geminids are a bright meteor shower that peak on December 13th and 14th. The Epsilon Geminids peak between October 18th and October 29th and have only been recently confirmed. They overlap with Orionids, which makes the Epsilon Geminids difficult to detect visually. Taurus. The name is Latin for the bull. Taurus is a large and prominent constellation in the northern hemisphere's winter sky. It is one of the oldest constellations, dating back to at least the early Bronze Age, when it marked the location of the sun during the spring equinox. Its importance to the agricultural calendar influenced various bull figures in mythology of ancient Sumer. Also Akkad, Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The identification of the constellation of Taurus with a bull is very old, certainly dating back to the Chalcolithic and perhaps even the Upper Paleolithic. Taurus is represented in a cave painting at the Hall of Bulls in the caves at Lascaux. It is accompanied by a depiction of the Pleiades. Taurus marked the point of the vernal spring equinox from about 4000 BC to 1700 BC, after which it moved to the neighboring constellation Aries. The Pleiades were closest to the sun at the vernal equinox around the 23rd century BC. In Babylonian astronomy, the constellation was listed in the Mola Pen as Gua'ana, the bull of heaven. It has been claimed that when the Babylonians first set up their zodiac, the vernal equinox laid in Taurus. The old Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, the goddess Ishtar sends Taurus, the bull of heaven, to kill Gilgamesh for spurning her advances. Enkidu tears off the bull's hind part and hurls the quarters into the sky, where they become the stars we now know as Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Some locate Gilgamesh as the neighboring constellation of Orion, facing Taurus as if in combat, while others identify him with the sun, whose rising on the equinox vanquishes the constellation. In early Mesopotamian art, the bull of heaven was closely associated with Inanna. In Greek mythology, Taurus was identified with Zeus, who assumed the form of a magnificent white bull to abduct Europa, a legendary Phoenician princess. In illustrations of Greek mythology, only the front portion of this constellation is depicted. This was sometimes explained as Taurus being partially submerged as he carried Europa out of the sea. A second Greek myth portrays Taurus as Io, a mistress of Zeus. To hide his lover from his wife, Hera, Zeus changed Io into the form of a heifer. Greek mythographer Akuslias marks the bull Taurus as the same that formed the myth of the Cretan bull, which was one of the 12 labors of Hercules. As of 2008, the sun appears in the constellation Taurus from May 13th to June 21st. Aries. The name is Latin for the ram. Aries came to represent specifically the ram whose fleece became the golden fleece of ancient Greek mythology. It has represented a ram since the late Babylonian times. Aries is recognized as an official specific region of the sky. In the description of the Babylonian zodiac given in the clay tablets, the constellation, now known as Aries, was the final station along the ecliptic. The earliest identifiable reference to Aries as a distinct constellation comes from the boundary stones that date from 1350 to 1000 BC. In ancient Egyptian astronomy, Aries was associated with the god Amun-Ra. It was called the indicator of the reborn sun. During the times of the year when Aries was prominent, priests would process statues of Amun-Ra to temples. Aries acquired the title Lord of the Head in Egypt, referring to its symbolic and mythological importance. The first point of Aries, the location of the vernal equinox, is named for the constellation. This is because the sun crossed the celestial equator from south to north in Aries more than 2 millennia ago. Hipparchus identified it in 130 BC as the point south of Gamma Aratus. Because of the process of the equinoxes, the first point of Aries has since moved into Pisces and will move into Aquarius around 2600 AD. The sun now appears in Aries from late April through mid-May, though the constellation is still associated with the beginning of spring. In a similar system to the Chinese, the first lunar mansion in Hindu astronomy was called Aswini, after the traditional name for the Beta and Gamma Aratus, the Aswins. Because the Hindu New Year begins with the vernal equinox, Aries itself is known as Ajah and Misha. In Hebrew astronomy, Aries was named Tele, It signified either Simeon or God, and generally symbolizes the Lamb of the world. Aries is home to several meteor showers. Most of the daytime Aretids are not visible to the naked eye. They are observed in a radio spectrum. This is possible because of the ionized gas they leave in their wake. Other meteor showers radiate from Aries during the day. This includes the daytime Epsilon Arids, and they appear from October 12th to October 23rd. Also, the northern and southern daytime May Aretids and the Delta Aretids are another meteor shower radiating from Aries. The shower lasts from December 8th to January 14th. We also have the autumn Aretids, which also radiate from Aries, and this lasts from September 7th to October 27th. Pisces. Pisces originates from some composition of the Great Swallow. In current Western Pisces and Anuntium, the Lady of Heaven, at the place of the northern fish. In the first millennium BC, text known as the Astronomical Diaries, part of the constellation, was also called Dununu, the fish cord or the ribbon. In the Greek version, according to Hyginus, Aphrodite and Eros, while visiting Syria, fled from the monster Typhon by leaping into the Euphrates River and transforming into fish. The Roman variant of the story has Venus and Cupid being carried away from this danger on the back of two fishes. There is also a somewhat different origin tale that Hyginus preserved in another work. According to this, an egg rolled into the Euphrates, and some fishes nudged this to shore, after which the doves sat on the egg until Aphrodite hatched out of it. The fishes were then rewarded by being placed in the sky as a constellation. This story is also recorded by the Third Vatican mythographer, Pegasus, a constellation in the northern sky, named after the winged horse Pegasus in Greek mythology. Pegasus in Greek mythology was a winged horse with magical powers. One myth regarding his powers says that his hooves dug out a spring. Pegasus was the one who delivered Medusa's head, after which he traveled to Mount Olympus in order to be the bearer of thunder and lightning for Zeus. Eventually, he became the horse to Bellerophon, who was asked to kill the Chimera, and succeeded with the help of Athena and Pegasus. Despite his success, after the death of his children, Bellerophon asked Pegasus to take him to Mount Olympus. Though Pegasus agreed, he plummeted back to Earth after Zeus either threw him a thunderbolt at him or made Pegasus buck him off. Pegasus was also recognized in some myths as the son of the Gorgon Medusa and the god Poseidon. In ancient Persia, Pegasus was depicted by Al-Sufi as a complete horse facing east. Unlike most other urographers, who had depicted Pegasus as half of a horse rising out of the ocean. In Hindu astronomy, the Great Square of Pegasus contained the 26th and 27th lunar mansions. More specifically, it represented a bedstead that was a resting place for the moon. Aquila. is a constellation on the celestial equator. Its name is Latin for eagle, and it represents the bird that carried Zeus, or Jupiter's thunderbolt in Greek Roman mythology. In Hinduism, the constellation Aquila is identified with the half-eagle, half-human deity Garuda. In Chinese astronomy, it is located within the heavenly market enclosure. The Maori people named Altair Potu Te Rangi, which means pillar of the sky, because of its very important position in their cosmology. Scutum. This constellation lies in the southern sky. Its name means the shield in Latin. It is the fifth smallest constellation in the sky. The constellation was originally introduced by the Polish astronomer Johannes Hevelius in the 17th century. Hevelius named it Scutum Sobieskianum, the shield of Sobieski, in honor of the Polish king Jan III Sobieski, who had been victorious in the Battle of Vienna in 1683. Scutum constellation is not associated with any myths. This is also not one of Ptolemy's original 48 constellations. Lyra is a small constellation. Lyra was often represented on star maps as a vulture or an eagle carrying a lyre, and hence is sometimes referred to as Vultur Cadens or Aquila Cadens, which means falling vulture or falling eagle. Lyra is nearly overhead in temperate northern latitudes shortly after midnight after the start of summer. From the equator to about the 40th parallel south, it is visible low in the northern sky during the same winter months. In Greek mythology, Lyra represents the lyre of Orpheus, made by Hermes from a tortoise shell, given to Apollo as a bargain. It was said to be the first lyre ever produced. Orpheus's music was said to be so great that even inanimate objects such as trees, streams, and rocks could be charmed. Joining Jason and the Argonauts, his music was able to quell the voices of the dangerous sirens who sang tempting songs to the Argonauts. At one point, Orpheus married Eurydice, a nymph. While fleeing from an attack by Aristeus, she stepped on a snake that bit her, killing her. To reclaim her, Orpheus entered the underworld, where the music from his lyre charmed Hades. Hades relented and let Orpheus bring Eurydice back on the condition that he never once looked back until outside. Unfortunately, near the very end, Orpheus faltered and looked back, causing Eurydice to be left in the underworld forever. Orpheus spent the rest of his life strumming his lyre while wandering aimlessly through the land, rejecting all marriage offers from women. Hercules is a constellation named after Hercules, the Roman hero, adapted from the Greek hero Hercules. The earliest Greek reference to the constellation do not refer to it as Hercules. Aratus describes it as follows: right there, in Draco's orbit wheel a phantom form, like to a man that strives at a task. That sign no man knows how to read clearly, nor what the task he is bent, but men simply call him on his knees. Now that phantom that toils on his knees seems to sit on a bended knee, and from both his shoulders his hands are upraised and stretched, one this way and one that, a fathom's length. Over the middle of the head of the crooked dragon he has the tip of his right foot. Here too that crown, which glorious Dionysus set to be a memorial of the dead Eridine, wheels beneath the back of the toil-spent phantom. To the phantom's back the crown is near, but by his head mark near at hand the head of Ophiuchus. Hermes pierced for strings and bade it be called the lyra, and he brought it into the heaven and set it in front of the unknown phantom. That croucher on his knees comes near the lyre with his left knee, but the top of the bird's head wheels on the other side, and between the bird's head and the phantom's knee is instarred the lyre. The story connecting Hercules with the constellation is recounted by Dionysus on his way back to Mycenae from Iberia, having obtained the castle of Geryon as his 10th labor. Hercules came to Liguria in northwestern Italy, where he engaged in battle with two giants, Albion and Bergion. The opponents were strong. Hercules was in a difficult position, so he prayed to his father Zeus for help. With the aegis of Zeus, Hercules won the battle. It was this kneeling position of Hercules, when prayed to his father Zeus, that gave him the name the Kneeler. Corona Borealis is a small constellation in the northern celestial hemisphere. Its brightest stars form a semicircle arc. Its Latin name, inspired by its shape, means northern crown. In classical mythology, Corona Borealis generally represents the crown given by the god Dionysus to the Cretan princess Eridine, and set by him in the heavens. Other cultures linked the pattern to a circle of elders, an eagle's nest, a bear's den, or even a smoke hole. Ptolemy also listed a southern counterpart, the Corona Australis, with a similar pattern. In Greek mythology, Corona Borealis was linked to the legend of Theseus and the Minotaur. It was generally considered to represent a crown given by Dionysus to Eridine, after she had been abandoned by the Athenian princess Theseus. When she wore the crown at her marriage to Dionysus, he placed it in the heavens to commemorate their wedding. In wealth mythology, it was called Caer Arianahud, the castle of the silver circle, and was the heavenly abode of the lady Arianahud. To ancient Balts, Corona Borealis was known as Darzelis, the flower garden. The Skitty people of Native America saw the stars of Corona Borealis representing a council of stars whose chief was Polaris. The Shawnee people saw the stars as the heavenly sisters who descended from the sky every night to dance on earth. Bootes is a constellation in the northern sky. The name comes from the Greek meaning herdsman or plowman. In ancient Babylon, the stars of Bootes were known as Shupa. They were apparently depicted as the god Enlil. The name Bootes was first used by Homer in his Odyssey as a celestial reference point for navigation, described as late setting or slow to set. Exactly whom Bootes is supposed to represent in Greek mythology is not clear. According to one version, he was a son of Demeter, twin brother of Plutus, a plowman who drove the oxen in the constellation Ursa Major. The Greek name for Bootes means bear watcher. The stars of Bootes were incorporated into many different Chinese constellations. Arcturus was part of the most prominent of these, variously designated as the Celestial King's Throne, or the Blue Dragon's Horn. Arcturus was given much importance in Chinese celestial mythology because of its status marking the beginning of the lunar calendar. Depictions of Bootes have varied historically. Aratus described him circling the North Pole, herding the two bears. Later, in ancient Greek depictions described by Ptolemy, have him holding the reins of his hunting dogs in his left hand, with a spear, club, or staff in his right hand. After Hevelius introduced Mon Maenalus in 1681, Bootes was often depicted standing on the Peloponnese mountain. Ursa Major, also known as the Great Bear, is a constellation in the northern sky whose associated mythology likely dates back into prehistory. Its Latin name means greater or larger she-bear, referring to and contrasting it with the nearby Ursa Minor, the lesser bear. Ursa Major is primarily known from the asterism of its 7 main stars, which has been called the Big Dipper. Its 2 brightest stars can be used as navigational pointer towards the place of the current North Pole star Polaris. Ursa Major is visible throughout the year from most of the northern hemisphere and appears circumpolar above the mid-northern latitudes. From southern temperate latitudes, the main asterism is invisible. In Roman mythology, Jupiter, the king of gods, lusts after a young woman named Callisto, a nymph of Diana. Jupiter's jealous wife discovers that Callisto has a son named Arcus and believes it's by Jupiter. Juno then transforms the beautiful Callisto into a bear, so she no longer attracts Jupiter. Callisto, while in bear form, later encounters her son Arcus. Arcus almost shoots the bear, but to avert the tragedy, Jupiter turns Arcus into a bear too and puts them both in the sky, forming Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. In ancient times, the name of the constellation was Helike, which means turning, because it turns around the pole. It is the sole constellation that never sinks below the horizon and bathes in the ocean's waves, so this is why it's used as a celestial reference point for navigation. Draco is a constellation in the far northern sky. Its name is Latin for dragon. Draco is circumpolar, never setting, and can be seen all year from the northern latitudes. Thuban, a Draconis, was the northern pole star from 3942 BC when it moved further north than Theta Bootes until 1793 BC. The Egyptian pyramids were designed to have one side facing north, with an entrance passage geometrically aligned so that Thuban would be visible at night. Due to the effects of the precession, it will again be the pole star around the year AD 21,000. The traditional name of the Alpha Draconis, Thuban, means head of the serpent. Dragons in Greek mythology that may have inspired the constellation's name include Ledon, the dragon who guarded the golden apples of the Hesperides. Hercules killed Ledon during his 12 labors. He was tasked with stealing the golden apples. In Greco-Roman legend, Draco was a dragon killed by the goddess Minerva and tossed into the sky upon his defeat. The dragon was one of the giants who battled the Olympic gods for 10 years. As Minerva threw the dragon, it became twisted on itself and froze at the cold north celestial pole before it could right itself. Sometimes Draco is represented as the Titan son of Gaia, Typhon. Traditionally, Arabic astronomy depicts that Draco had 100 magnificent heads, guarded the golden apple tree, and was put in the sky as a constellation for protecting the apples with valor. In February, we have the Draconids, which is a meteor shower that was discovered February 4, 2011. Auriga is north of the celestial equator. Its name is Latin for the charioteer. Auriga is most prominent during winter evenings in the northern hemisphere, as are 5 other constellations that have stars in the winter hexagon asterism. Because of its northern declination, Auriga is only visible in its entirety as far as 34 degrees south. The first record of Auriga's stars was in Mesopotamia as a constellation called Gam, representing a scimitar or crook. In Greek mythology, Auriga is often identified as the mythological Greek hero Eratosthenes of Athens, the son of Hephaestus, who was raised by the goddess Athena. His chariot was created in the image of the sun's chariot, the reason Zeus placed him in the heavens. The Athenian hero then dedicated himself to Athena, and soon after Zeus raised him into the night sky in honor of his ingenuity and his heroic deeds. Indigenous people of California and Nevada also noticed the bright patterns of Auriga's stars. To them, the constellation's bright stars formed a curve that was represented in crescent-shaped petroglyphs. The people of Marshall Island featured Auriga in the myth of Dumur, which tells the story of the creation of the sky. Antares in Scorpius represents Dumur, the oldest son of the star's mother, and the Pleiades represent her youngest son. Auriga is home to 2 meteor showers. The Aurigids, and formerly called the Alpha Aurigids, are renowned for their intermittent outbursts, such as those in 1935, 1986, 1994, and 2007. The Zeta Aurigids are a weak shower with a northern and southern branch lasting from December 11th to January 21st. Perseus is a constellation in the northern sky, being named after the Greek mythological hero Perseus. Perseus was tasked with saving Andromeda from the Kraken. Perseus hosts the radiant of the annual Perseids meteor shower, one of the most prominent meteor showers in the sky. They radiate from mid-July, peaking in activity between the 9th and 10th of August each year. They have been observed for about 2,000 years. Horologium. This constellation lies in the southern sky. Its name means the clock in Latin. It is a small, faint constellation that was created in the 18th century by the French astronomer Nicolas Louis de Lacaille. Lacaille originally named the constellation Horologium Oscillatorium, or the pendulum clock, but the name was later shortened simply to Horologium, the clock. The constellation is not associated with any mists and does not have any bright stars. This is not one of Ptolemy's original 48 constellations. Crater is a small constellation in the southern celestial hemisphere. It depicts a cup that has been associated with the god Apollo and is perched on the back of Hydra, the water snake. Crater is identified with a story from Greek mythology in which a crow or raven serves Apollo and is sent to fetch water. But it delays its journey as it finds some figs and waits for them to ripen before eating them. Finally, it retrieves the water in a cup and takes back a water snake, blaming it for drinking the water. According to the myth, Apollo saw through the fraud and angrily cast the crow, cup, and snake into the sky. The 3 constellations were arranged in such a way that the crow was prevented from drinking from the cup. Phylarchus wrote of a different origin for Crater. He told how the city of Eleusa near Troy was beset by plague. Its ruler, Demiphon, consulted an oracle who decreed that a maiden would be sacrificed each year. Demiphon declared that he would choose a maiden by lottery, but did not include his own daughters. One noble objected, so Demiphon sacrificed his daughter. Later, Mastusius killed Demiphon's daughters and fed the ruler a mixture of their blood and wine from a cup. Upon finding out the deed, the king ordered Mastusius and the cup to be thrown into the sea. Crater signifies the cup. The craterids are a faint meteor shower that takes place between January 11th and January 22nd. Argo, a very large constellation in the southern sky that has been divided into 3 constellations of Carina, Puppis, and Vela. The genitive was Argus Navis. Flamsteed and other early modern astronomers called the constellation Navis the ship. It was identified in Greek mythology with Argo, the ship used by Jason and the Argonauts that sailed to Colchis in search of the Golden Fleece. The original constellation is presently found near the southern horizon of the Mediterranean sky, becoming visible in springtime and sailed westward, skimming along the river of the Milky Way. Argo Navis was long known to Greek observers who were believed to have derived it from Egypt around 1000 BCE. For example, Plutarch identified Argo with the Egyptian constellation called the Boat of Osiris. Ptolemy described Argo as occupying the portion of the Milky Way between Canis Major and Centaurus, and identified stars comprising such detail as the little shield, the steering oar, the mast holder, the stern ornament, which continued to be reflected in cartographic representations in celestial atlases into the 19th century. Another interesting feature of the constellation is that it appeared to be moving backwards against the backdrop of the night sky. The final breakup and abolishment of Argo was proposed by Sir John Herschel in 1841 and again in 1844. As a result of this breakup, Argo is the only one of the 48 original constellations listed by Ptolemy in his Almagest that is no longer officially recognized as a single constellation. The tools. These are three interesting looking constellations that are shaped like a ruler, a square set, a compass, and a triangle. These are not Ptolemy's original 48 constellations. The first is Norma. It means normal in Latin, referring to a right angle, and it represents a level, a set square, a ruler, and a carpenter square. The constellation was introduced in the mid-18th century. Norma constellation is not associated with any myths. Circinus is a constellation located in the southern sky. Its name means the compass in Latin, referring to the tool used for drawing circles. Circinus was created and first catalogued by the French astronomer Nicolas Louis de Lacaille in the 18th century. Lacaille created the constellation to bridge the void between Triangulum Australe and the stars marking Centaurus's forefeet. Triangulum Australe is a constellation that lies in the southern sky. Its name means the southern triangle in Latin. The three brightest stars in the constellation form an equilateral triangle. Triangulum Australe was created by the Dutch astronomer Petrus Plancius in the late 16th century. The constellation is located too far south to be visible from Europe and most of the northern hemisphere, but it never sets below the horizon south of the equator. Now, let's take a look at some other zodiac-related data. The movements. The zodiacs have 3 different movements. They are in 3 groups of 4, each group having its own type of movement. The first is a fixed group, which the movement is like a square. This group consists of Taurus, Aquarius, Leo, and Scorpio. The second is the mutable group, which the movement is that of an infinity sign. This group consists of Virgo, Gemini, Pisces, and Sagittarius. The last group is the cardinal group, which the movement is a direct movement of either up, down, toward you, or away from you. This group consists of Capricorn, Libra, Cancer, and Aries. The next bit we can look at is the information given to us about the pre-Diluvian zodiac. Evidence of a correspondence between the pre-Diluvian patriarchs and the signs of the zodiac is found in the Jewish synagogue inscription from Engedi. The synagogue itself was destroyed around 530 AD. The zodiac signs were allocated to Adam and his descendants as follows. Abel, Aries. Aries is the sign representing the first generation, and Aries is the first sign of the zodiac in every astrological system. Aries, the lamb, represents Adam's firstborn Abel, the shepherd. Seth, Taurus. Seth was so named because his mother Eve exclaimed at his birth, "God has appointed me another seed in place of Abel, whom Cain slew." The other seed is really the same seed in another form. The exchange of Seth for Abel because of the latter's murder by Cain is exactly symbolized in the conjoined sign Taurus and Auriga. The jealous bull attacks two children who are protected by the shepherd Auriga and Capella, the latter being the children's mother, Auriga, Adam, Capella, Eve. And the two children of Eve are Seth and Abel. The Hermetic literature states that Agathodaimon is the biblical patriarch Seth. In Egypt, Agathodaimon was equated with Osiris, and Osiris was believed to be represented in the zodiac by the sign of Taurus. Enosh, Gemini. The name Enosh means human companionship. It is represented in the zodiac by two equivalent males, two men embracing in fellowship, or a male and a female pair, the Gemini. Canaan, Cancer. Canaan means gathering together into a home, nest, or community. It is represented in the zodiac by a crab or similar creature gathering together its offspring with its pincers. The offspring being the cluster of stars known as Praesepe. Mahalalel, Leo. Mahalalel means public recognition or acclaim of the divine leader, symbolized in the zodiac by a lion, the universally recognized king of beasts. Jared, Virgo. Jared means descent or fall anciently. Jared's name was taken to signify prophetically the pre-diluvian descent of the sons of God and their indiscriminate comings with the daughters of men. This in turn was a historical development and reduplication of the fall of Eve. As Eve was seduced by the fallen angel Satan working through the serpent, so the daughters of men were seduced by the fallen sons of God. God promised, however, that a seed of the woman would come one day who would crush the serpent's head, and who would be wounded in the heel himself in the process. This great Bible theme is symbolized by the sign of Virgo, which represents a sexually mature virgin holding a vine plant, who is the mother of a seed, Spica. The botanical imagery is clear throughout. The virgin lying on her side is actually identified with the fallen tree or felled branch, which is to bring forth the promised seed. Sometimes the branch is a palm branch, the palm being a tree which reproduces by fertilizing itself, the virgin birth. Enoch, Libra. Enoch means to begin to teach, instruct, train, tame, break in, or to initiate an animal or human, originally by control of the jaws or rubbing the palate. It is symbolized by the sign of Libra, meaning the beginning of the acquisition of judgment or discernment, and originally this sign forms the jaws of the claws of the scorpion, representing divine judgment by the word. The sign depicts the commencement of the weighing, one scale being lower than the other, specifically the beginning of judgment or discernment. Methuselah, Scorpio. Methuselah means armed man or security man, man of a sting or dart. It is symbolized by Scorpio, a creature armed with a sting, which it throws at its victim like a dart, using its bow like a tail. Lamech, Sagittarius, comes from the root LMK. The meaning is to melt, sink down, cringe, bow, be bent, vanish away, fade, or dissolve, so that the LMK is a variant of NMK, to dissolve. As elsewhere in Hebrew, L and M are interchangeable. The root NMK is cognate to the word makak, which are used to describe the melting, bending, or bowing effect. The name Lamech is a noun formed from this root and therefore means bowing or bending, being aptly symbolized by the bent bow of Sagittarius. And in some zodiacs, the asterism is represented accordingly simply by a bent bow. The loaded bow is also a symbol of male fertility, hence the equine body of Sagittarius and other zodiacs. Other connotation is fading out so that Sagittarius is specifically the shooter of meteoric arrows, which burn out in the atmosphere. From the root meaning arises the further signification, subdue level, cause the bow down, overthrown. And hence the name Lamech is interpreted to mean the strong, the mighty, the wild and invincible overthrower. This meaning, too, is aptly portrayed by the figure of a wild centaur stepping forward in combat in the act of firing a bow, leveling his enemies with a shower of meteoric arrows. Noah, Capricorn. Noah means rest or relief, literally the reclining of an animal. It is symbolized by the reclining ungulate, goat, sheep, or antelope of Capricorn, which in some zodiacs is simply a reclining ungulate, but in others it is depicted with the tail of a fish, representing the two phases of Noah's life, pre- and post-flood. The flood was believed to have been foretold by a gathering of all the planets and the signs of Capricorn. Japheth and Ham, Pisces. Japheth means multiplication of progeny or numerical expansion. It is represented by crossed fishes in Pisces, the fish being symbolic of the numerical increase of progeny. There is a further reference in the sign to the flood through which Japheth passed, and to the fact that there was a conflict between Japheth's descendants and Hamites, specifically with Ham's son Canaan and his progeny, who, though bound by his family kinship to Japheth, which is the band around the sign of Pisces, yet tended in earthly and opposite directions. symbolized by the fish in Pisces swimming along the ecliptic, the worldly path, contrary to the direction of other fish, which is swimming towards the zenith. And the last bit I'd like to finish with is the fact that the zodiac relates to the gates. This was presented originally with the seasons video, so let's focus on this information. Each of the 12 gates is associated directly with a particular zodiac in relation to which gate the sun is launching from during the year. They are as follows. Gate 4R is Aries. Gate 5R is Taurus. Gate 6R is Gemini. Gate 6F is Cancer. Gate 5F is Leo. Gate 4F is Virgo. Gate 3R is Libra. Gate 2R is Scorpio. Gate 1R is Sagittarius. Gate 1F is Capricorn. Gate 2F is Aquarius. And Gate 3F is Pisces. This explains our zodiac months as well as why the sun appears to rise from a specific degree for so long. It's simply rising from the front and rear gate of this area. This also, as presented in the seasons video, gives us the analemma of the sun, the infinity symbol. So, I hope you enjoyed learning about the heavens as much as I did. Now, I'm going to hand it over so we can head down to hell.
You better buckle up for this one, people. We're on an express elevator to hell, but we will be coming back. What you are seeing is real-world magnetic data supplied by Ceres, showing a top-down view of our realm. This is a clip he made to show how we can move around the magnetic data. This particular clip is descending from an altitude of 130,000 kilometers, that's 80,778 miles, down to the center of our map. X marks the spot. Notice the coiled areas rising to amazing heights. These go deep below ground. The thin white lines you can see crossing them are this magnetic data we see here, the same data we have seen clouds taking the shape of. Each of these coiled areas would represent the angel technology below, the particle accelerators, the seal of the 144,000 in their sealed rooms below. Remember, scriptures tells you the underworld is their prison. This is just some of the many that will be down there. The spiraling effect from them is their signature. You can see how the one at the center is being compressed by others and its pressure wave is forced north and south. This is the compression and expansion that we covered in our Let There Be Light video, and it is amazing to see it show on this magnetic data, thus confirming the APM model more. North is the top right and south the bottom left. The equator is going bottom right to top left of your screen. And now a sneak preview of what is below. This is looking directly over the equator and reveals some very interesting formations below. We will be looking forward to more of this data from Ceres, and we can present and explain them in future videos. This is amazing work by Ceres, and I'll leave a link to his channel below. Here are a few more images from Ceres. Notice the coiled areas of magnetic data captured brilliantly. You can also see their pressure waves quite clearly in this. This is fantastic work and I can't wait to see more. To demonstrate how they work, I'll use this clip made by Sandra's Hubby. I'm sure most will remember the Taurus field people such as Santos Bonacci show. It is actually many Taurus fields, as each have their own unique Taurus field. These three, however, are working together. The one in the east is following a left-hand rule, and the one in the west a right-hand rule. The effects from these two spiraling movements are what causes the centre one to compress and expand north and south. These two locations are very well known for their large deep quakes. You should recognise these shapes from Walter Russell's work, where he demonstrates how the vortexes work. Nikola Tesla also worked with counter-rotating coils. This is also what creates the hourglass shape, as referenced by Santos Bonacci. This technology emits a spiraling pressure wave as the flow around the halo causes the reaction needed to generate harnessable electricity, as seen in Walter Russell's work. The division and multiplication of the sex pairs, the same as what was decoded in the Colosseum video, and of course how our realm truly works. The spirals and the ancient glyphs everywhere tell us the ancients all knew how this worked. These are electromagnetic projections from below. We have covered these in numerous videos. The stationary halos people record everywhere are often termed lunar waves, which is really the moon highlighting them in the foreground as it passes in the background. All luminaries can highlight them as they pass by. You can see how spiral galaxies and other galaxies, as they call them, get their shapes now. They are more than likely illuminated particles trapped in an electromagnetic field that is caused by a halo in the vicinity. They operate exactly the same as a tornado and are in fact the cause of a tornado. The twin counter-rotating coils create that Higgs boson needed to generate electricity. This is where the 1 and the 1.618 numbers Santos Bonacci speaks of comes into play. The larger coil would be the lower projected halo, and the smaller coil would be in the centre and create the narrower Higgs boson. This one would be projected the highest and is the actual cause of the sprites. The sprites appearing are in fact a reaction to this halo's sudden appearance and vortex. A smaller halo driving the electrical energy and vortex down through the centre to be harnessed below. The outside forces create a torus field which will spiral upwards and mushroom out at the top. It is the exact same process seen in Walter Russell's optical motor, where the shaft narrows and creates a pressure wave which results in free harnessable energy, the exact point where it divided and multiplied the sex pairs. We have stated before the halos are the origin of lightning. Lightning now has its cause identified in the APM model. Can we reference anything that behaves how we have just described?
Of course we do, FPV. Land-based ones will create tornadoes, high winds, storms and lightning, as seen in these video clips. So big thanks to Chris Hughes for the tornado footage, and Underwater Huntress and Kevin Johnson for sharing their amazing waterspout captures of these events, of which you can see are an effect from the Angel technologies. Ones below the oceans are what create whirlpools and waterspouts, storms and lightning. It is the same spiralling forces. It is the earth, air, fire and water events, referenced everywhere. This is what it truly relates to, part of the processes of the Angel technologies. The APM model addresses and references the causes and effects quite easily, as you can see.
I made this clip to show you what the constellations look like as they cross our map and grid. You can see the compression at the centre, and the ones in the north and south appear to be revolving around those locations. This, however, could be due to perspective and the way our eyes work. They may in fact be crossing in straight lines. This, of course, comes under the category of full exploration to reveal exactly what is taking place in the extreme north and south with our luminaries. Of course, we all know that exploration above and below certain latitudes are not exactly encouraged, in fact quite the opposite. The labels attributed to the luminaries are reversed, as this is a top-down view above them, so I could demonstrate them correctly going east to west. The alignments aren't perfect, but will serve their purpose for this demonstration. I faded the map and grid's opacity in and out so you can see the alignments as they cross the heavens. The program I'm using is called Stellaris and is a free download. The expansion and compression we demonstrated in our Let There Be Light video may also be playing a part in this, as they send a shockwave north and south. This is very evident in the magnetic data and may play a part in illuminating stars. Remember, Walter Russell states there is only light. At rest it is darkness, and when moved it becomes illuminated. It simply requires the correct circumstances to move, which you will get to see in a few moments. The fantastic constellation presentation One Conscience just presented will be continued into another video sometime. A big shout out go out here to Sandra's hubby, who has been doing some fantastic work in the graphics department and helping APM to bring this story to light. Well done, that man, you know who you are. I want you to pay attention to the Milky Way in this clip. Do you see what I see? Yes, it is the sine wave. If you watch, you will see the sun always rises at the same location of the sine wave and moves with it. The sine wave is our luminary's prime driver. For example, it would push the sun, or rather in the underworld, it would push our solar boat, the scarab beetle, east to west. It would then return east following the movement of the sine wave, as we have shown to be the light they call the ISS. Do we not wonder why that light in the sky follows a sine wave path? I added the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn so you can see it is actually contained between these two locations and very much involved in driving luminaries east to west. This is where our earth chakras come into play. If you remember my first video on this research, I added a waveform across the map, as I could see back then that it was related to the chakras and a waveform. That waveform is now decoded as the Milky Way, or perhaps we should call it the Milky Wave. When I showed my Nazca line work, which decoded to me as the technical blueprints to the realm, and the research and decodings One Conscience and myself worked upon, to Jimbo, who is a black box engineer, he instantly recognised it as a setup very similar to a sweepback transformer and flyback killer, a cathode ray tube and an oscilloscope. You can watch Jimbo's breakdown of it on my channel. He is indeed correct, as our research is proving. Jimbo joined us to help with explaining the technical side of this configuration and is always at hand in the background helping when he can. I do think there are more waveforms of various frequencies that drive various luminaries, which we will get to in a moment. You can see how the sun in this clip is being moved within that sine wave. It would arrive in the west, shut down or switch to standby mode and be pushed east again ready for the next sunrise. This would be the flyback killer, which by design moves it as quickly as possible east. The light in the sky we call the ISS, in our opinion, is this light. We decoded it as Isis, Ra's mother, or Mary, the star of the sea. Every culture has a name for this process. We just seem to have forgotten what it all is truly related to.
To break down and decode this realm, we must look at it with a technological mindset, from the workings of it to the scriptures that describe it. Mount Sinai is a good example of one we can decode to show you how it's done easily. Mount Sinai is an unidentified mountain, except for some speculation in scriptures, where Moses receives the laws. So let's give it an APM decode. First, we'll have to put etymology to play here. I like to use a good dictionary to look up the words to find the meanings. You will find that words have other meanings when speaking in terms of electrical, physics, and mathematics. Mount means to climb or ascend, or to increase in amounts. Sin is the abbreviation of the sine in trigonometry. A stands for acceleration. I stands for inertia. Using these definitions, we can see what Mount Sinai really means. To reveal light, you accelerate it from inertia. You use the sine wave to increase the frequency to go from the dark to the light. The yin-yang comes into play here. Dark is the male resting, and white is the female moving light, as referenced by Santos Bonacci. These are the laws given to Moses. The laws were related to the luminaries, such as they will not transgress their bounds, nor stray from their course, which is referenced in the book of Enoch. Once you understand the workings of the realm, it is not hard to understand Enoch and other ancient texts. Okay, here I have taken some bits from Inanna going through the gates of the underworld. This story and all moon deities are relating to the moon and moon phases. This is the shutdown of the moon piece by piece, creating the phases that we see through the month leading up to the new moon, where it is shut down for 3 days. I am Inanna, Queen of Heaven, on my way to the east. Neti spoke. Stay here, Inanna. I will speak to my queen. I will give her your message. Neti, the chief gatekeeper of the Kur, entered the palace of Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, and said, My queen, a maid as tall as heaven, as wide as the earth, as strong as the foundations of the city wall, waits outside the palace gates. She has gathered together the 7 me. She has taken them in her hands, with the me in her possession. She has prepared herself. When Ereshkigal heard this, she spoke. Come, Neti, my chief gatekeeper of the Kur, heed my words. Bolt the 7 gates of the underworld. Then, one by one, open each gate a crack. Let Inanna enter. As she enters, remove her royal garments. Let the holy priestess of heaven enter bowed low. When she entered the first gate, from her head the shagura, the crown of the steep, was removed. What is this? Asked Inanna, and the gatekeeper said,
Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned.
When she entered the second gate, from her neck the small lapis beads were removed. What is this? Asked Inanna, and the gatekeeper said,
Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned.
When she entered the third gate, from her breast the double strand of beads was removed. What is this? Asked Inanna, and the gatekeeper said,
Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned.
When she entered the fourth gate, from her chest The breastplate called Let Him Come, was removed. "What is this?" asked Inanna, and the gatekeeper said,
"Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned."
When she entered the 5th gate, from her wrist the gold ring was removed. "What is this?" asked Inanna, and the gatekeeper said,
"Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned."
When she entered the 6th gate, from her hand the lapis measuring rod and line was removed. "What is this?" asked Inanna, and the gatekeeper said,
"Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned."
When she entered the 7th gate, from her body the royal robe was removed. "What is this?" asked Inanna, and the gatekeeper said,
"Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned."
Naked and bowed low, Inanna entered the throne room. Ereshkigal rose from her throne. Inanna started towards the throne, the Anuanna. The judges of the underworld surrounded her. They passed judgment against her. Then Ereshkigal fastened on Inanna the eye of death. She spoke against her the word of wrath. She uttered against her the cry of guilt. She struck her. Inanna was turned into a corpse, a piece of rotting meat, and was hung from a hook on the wall. When after 3 days and 3 nights Inanna had not returned, Ninshubur set up a lament for her by the ruins. She beat the drum for her in the assembled places. She circled the houses of the gods. She tore at her eyes. She tore at her mouth. She tore at her thighs. She dressed herself in a single garment like a beggar. The corpse was given to them. The Kugara sprinkled the food of life on the corpse. The Galater sprinkled the water of life on the corpse. Inanna rose. And now I'll hand it over to a technical breakdown of this process from FPV. Thank you.
Okay, so following on from Inanna, who was obviously the moon, and the story was about the lunar phases. I looked into the phases as we previously mentioned and the waveform overlaps that have to be occurring. Lunar phases. This is one occlusion of a waveform on our moon that creates what we call phases. Going back to Inanna, this is the moon being occluded by this waveform until it is in full totality and becomes a new moon. Inanna's Me and My 7, total 8 nodes being occluded. The moon has to be a similar halo that has 8 nodes just like our sun. It then goes through its various phases again until its next occlusion. It is the same occlusion but a top-down perspective. This waveform decodes as Rahu. Rahu is a shadow entity if you look it up, one that causes eclipses and is the king of meteors. The moon being swallowed by Rahu is in fact this waveform shadow. Lunar eclipses. We have something special to show you with the lunar eclipses. If you look carefully, you will see it as an occlusion of 2 separate waveforms. one being dark, the other red. This is causing a polarization effect on our spherical ball of light we call the moon. You will notice on the time and date animation they also had to use two separate waveforms to achieve the same effect. Here's another top-down view of the lunar eclipse. The red wave decodes as Ketu. This is the second waveform you see going across the moon, then exiting, and then the first larger waveform exits. Ketu is regarded as a shadow planet, but like Rahu, it casts its own shadow. The lunar eclipse is two eclipses in one. Be sure to keep recording after the red wave Ketu has left, or you will miss the first larger waveform exiting the scene. This one still needs identified, but is clearly a larger waveform than Ketu.
Today, let's look into obelisks, temples and other structures around the world. The truth is in plain sight, and because of what we are taught, we do not understand the significance of the structures around us, or the layouts of the very areas around these in the microform of the surrounding areas all the way through the macroforms of towns and cities. The obelisk name came from ancient Greece, obelisks, diminutive of obelos. Originally they were called tekenu by the ancient Egyptians. Tekenu means to pierce, as in to pierce the sky. Another meaning of pierce, you may not be aware, is to transfix, which means to make motionless. This to me is interpreted as the fixed stars which do not move across the ecliptic. In the same way as planets, they appear to be motionless. These are our constellations. Ancient obelisks are monolithic. They consist of a single stone. Herodotus, a Greek traveller, was the first of recorded history that is told to us to describe the objects. The earliest temple obelisk is still in its original position in Heliopolis and stands 68 feet high and weighs 120 metric ton. It symbolised the sun god Ra, and during the religious reformation of Akhenaten, it was said to have been a petrified ray of the Aten, the sun disk. It was also thought that the god existed within the structure. Let's take a moment and look at some highlights of the Egyptian creation story, as this will relate to the obelisk and the obelisk site designs. In the beginning there was darkness, a watery abyss of chaos, the primordial ocean of Nun. Out of the Nun came the Benben, which is the pyramid whence the sun rose for the first time to light the world. This is also where the first god Atum stood. Atum is the source of everything in the world, thus the creator of all life. Before rising atop the Benben, Atum was floating within the Nun, holding both the male and female aspects within. Atum created life by using the female part in him to spawn the god of air and emptiness, Shu, and his sister Tefnut, the goddess of moisture and mist. Once his first two children were created, the one became three. Chaos left the world and light entered it. Shu and Tefnut mated and produced the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut. Geb and Nut were in such a tight embrace that they had to be separated by their father, so Geb laid down to form the earth and Nut extended over the earth and became the sky, the duality, as above so below. The Benben stone, also known as the Pyramidion, is the top stone of the Egyptian pyramid. It is also related to the obelisk. The pyramid and obelisk significance have been previously overlooked, especially the astronomical phenomena connected with sunrise and sunset, the zodiacal light and sun pillars respectively. The obelisks used to represent the living deity of the pharaoh. They were raised carefully and positioned so that the first and last light of the day would touch their peaks to honour the sun god. The sun god would then enter on the journey of navigating his barge through the underworld and avoid great destruction by the great serpent Apophis. The ancients used the obelisks to serve as sundials in the journey of Ra across the sky. Some temples were built close enough to the Nile so they became partially submerged during the river's annual flooding. These would then work as the Colosseum, as was shown previously in the Colosseum decode. Some temples were built with the obelisk on top of them and aligned with the sun's daily passage. The alignment was seen in the horizon following the east to west path, as well as the vertical to align as the sun took its journey up and down the gates. Since these times, many of Egypt's obelisks have been destroyed, dismantled for new religions to consume the land, stolen or given to other countries as gifts. Of the 29 original obelisks in Egypt, only 9 remain. Of the 3 obelisks that survived time from Assyria, none remain there. We can find them in the British Museum. From Ethiopia, only one remains standing and can be found at the northern Stelae Park in Axum. When the Romans conquered Egypt, they began taking the obelisks as their own. On top of stealing, they erected 7 of their own from Egyptian style. These are found in Aries, France, Munich, Germany, and 5 in Rome. The APM perspective on obelisks are that they are location markers for the angel technologies below. They would represent the direct centre of a halo. They would be directly at the centre of lunar waves and other solitary halos observed in the heavens by many people now. Consider this when halo hunting. You can view various captures of these halos in our videos. A big shout out again to all those people sharing these very special captures.
Here is a bonus decode clip. I looked at these images and noticed the technology hiding within. We will start with Sol, our sun. I fade out the parts we don't need, and lo and behold, we reveal our sun halo. I do think the sun emblem also depicts the nodes we see around our sun halo. Although we see 8 on the large horizontal halo, there may be more on other parts we have not seen as yet. Also take notice of the external solid band. Next is lunar, our moon. Notice this one has been given a face. I think this represents it being able to display the face of the moon, which has to be something close to the projector. The moon halo is very much the same configuration as our sun's halo. Pay particular attention to the waveforms around the moon, which may very well represent the pattern seen with Rahu and Ketu, the 2 waveforms that are definitely involved in the movement of luminaries. Next is Mercury. Notice this one has what we call a vertical halo, but this one contains 2, so it is a different model to the Sun and Moon halo. The star contains 8 nodes, and the external waveform again is reminiscent of Rahu and Ketu, indicating they play a part in the motion or control over this projector. Venus, also containing 8 nodes. Notice how the gap between the 2 vertical halos is much wider than the previous model. This also appears to be controlled by Rahu and Ketu, if we use the external band as a guide to what is controlling its movement. Mars, containing 12 nodes and 2 vertical halos. Again, this one appears to be under Rahu and Ketu's control, as the external band is a guide. This one appears to contain a lot of bands which may decode as pressure waves, as they depict various colours of the spectrum. Jupiter. Notice Jupiter's 2 external bands, which may be counter-rotating accelerators. The stars may depict its high altitude, and the central band does contain more halos. The 2 vertical halos also appear to be larger. Saturn. This one contains 2 external bands, possibly counter-rotating, 2 internal halos, again they may be counter-rotating, and 2 smaller vertical halos that have a different pattern to them. This one contains 7 nodes, but we do also consider Jupiter's moons to be nodes on one of its halos, so they may all contain more nodes than we have actually seen as yet. There is probably more information hiding within these images, but this clip was just to show you what I noticed within them.
Many ancient cultures share similar beliefs, fundamental elements that vary slightly from culture to culture. While individual cultures have different stories attached to these elements, the elements themselves are present in cultures all over the world. The axis mundi is one of these elements, often depicted as a world tree or a world mountain. The axis mundi represents the connection between the different worlds of ancient belief. For the sake of keeping this discussion from becoming overly complicated, I will stick to the model of a world tree. On the world tree, the branches represent the heaven world, where the luminaries play across the sky. It was here that the gods dwelt. The roots of the tree represented the underworld. There were often gods and godlike beings that dwelt here too. If you have been following our work, you will know what we think these gods were. The angels, or accelerators, exist in the underworld, and it's the accelerators that project the luminaries in the heavens. The trunk of the tree represents the part of the world where we live. The tree is said to represent the center of the world. This does not mean that there is a giant tree growing in the exact center of our realm. Shamans who remember, and are most familiar with, these old teachings will tell you quite frankly that the center, or axis mundi, is at the location you find yourself at any given moment. So once again we have a common element in ancient culture, passed down to us through allegorical stories. The common misconception about the world tree is that it represents a torus field. The fact that the center is everywhere you could possibly go negates that theory. Also, the symbol of a world mountain does not fit a torus field. So let's take a deeper look into the axis mundi. Almost invariably, you find reference to specific animals associated with the world tree. An eagle lives in the top branches. Down amongst the roots, a snake, a serpent, or a dragon resides. The eagle and the snake are mortal enemies, directly opposed to each other. They are constantly at odds. We believe the eagle and the snake to be the two opposite charges of electricity. In many cultures, the eagle is associated with lightning, from the majestic thunderbird to Zeus, who would turn into an eagle and cast lightning down at his enemies. The eagle is strongly associated with atmospheric phenomena. We also know that the layer of the sky known as the ionosphere carries a very high electrical charge. The Earth's electrical field is ever present. On average, the field has 100 volts per meter of altitude, with highest voltage at the upper levels. The snake, or dragon, resides in the underworld. It represents the opposite electrical charge. We are very familiar with lightning strikes descending from the clouds to strike the ground. But there are also positive lightning bolts that travel upwards from ground to sky, as above, so below, two opposing electrical charges in an ever-present static electrical field. There is sometimes mention of a third animal that dwells on the tree. In the Norse version, this is the squirrel named Ratatoskar. This mischievous little troublemaker spends his time delivering insults between the eagle and the snake. In doing so, he keeps the rivalry going. Walter Russell taught that the two opposing forces of electricity are kept separate by what we know as magnetism. Magnetism balances and controls the equality of the two opposed electric charges. Now that we have a better understanding of the allegorical components of the world tree, we can decode it. The axis mundi is wherever you happen to be. This means that wherever you go, the forces of electricity and magnetism will have the same general effect on you. We live in a static electromagnetic field. And while there are slight differences in the field at different locations, the physical effects of that field are constant. Whether you see matter as particles or wave functions, we can still discuss the electrical components within matter without arguing overly much. All matter is composed of these electric charges. Matter will gravitate to the point in the electromagnetic field which is consistent with its electrical potential. What we call gravitation is a function of the electrical component of the electromagnetic field. We can then define gravitation as the repelling force from the opposite electric charge. Not everything is repelled downward as we commonly think when we discuss gravitation. Indeed, some matter is repelled upwards, such as is the case for helium. All matter is being pushed into the area of the field where it has like electrical potential. Walter Russell spoke of gravitation as a function of electrical potential. I highly recommend his books. There is further evidence found in creation stories. The ancients spoke of an original deity. This deity is often told to have had two offspring. One was the embodiment of the sky, the other embodied the earth. The world tree was planted to separate the two. This is consistent with Walter Russell's ideas of a universal one, a single consciousness that first split itself into the two opposing electrical forces which govern all things. This can be seen as one of the cubes Walter spoke of. One half of the cube is positively charged, the other half negatively charged. It is in this cube that our realm would exist, with the surface plane of the Earth being parallel with the magnetic plane that divides the two equally opposed electrical forces. Essentially, we live inside a giant capacitor, where everything we know of acts as the dielectric, including ourselves. A capacitor consists of two plates. One plate carries a positive charge, and the other has a negative charge. Locally, one of the two plates consists of what we know of as the ionosphere. It's possible the large star halos have a role to play in that in some fashion, but the star halos are inside the electrical field as well, so that can only be speculated for now. The bottom plate is below us somewhere. We don't know its exact location, but we know it must carry the opposite electric charge as the ionosphere. It's possible the angel accelerators, in conjunction with the large star halos, influences the field to make our experience of gravitation different from whatever lands exist, if any do, outside of our realm. Everything between these two plates acts as a dielectric. The particles of a dielectric within an electric field will align themselves to conform to the direction of the electrical force inside that field. In Earth's case, we and everything else here act as those particles. The dielectric is not one solid chunk. We are a dynamic system of varying density and physical state. This gives everything a certain room to move, and the various parts will be inclined to find the area of electrical potential that align with their inherent charge. The denser matter is forced down, while the lighter matter is forced upwards. Within the static electrical field, everything that we call matter creates a sort of whirlpool in the field. We call these whirlpools torus fields. They are the result of compression and expansion forces from the electrical field itself. The mythos of the world tree is a beautiful allegory and describes the fundamental forces that govern our realm. Whether our realm is the extent of existence or not is debatable. Only time and exploration will tell.
you.